Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in this world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm your hostess, Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm normally the moderator for today's event, but I am here to welcome you. Today's event promises to be a really fascinating one with lots of really great information. But before we get started, I do want to go over just a few housekeeping items. First of all, today's webinar is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, just know that you'll receive a link post-event by email that you can click on and just listen to the webinar on demand. Also, we are taking questions from the audience today, so if at any time during the presentation you have a question for any of our panelists, just use that control panel on your screen, type in your question. We'll take probably about 15 minutes or so near the end of the presentation and go through as many questions as we can. So our webinar today is 3 critical keys to DevOps success, lessons from Intel, independent research firm, and more. That independent research firm being Forrester. As I said before, normally I'm the moderator for today's event, but today we are going to have Sam Fell from Electric Cloud, who is doing the honors for me. Sam, welcome to today's webinar. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll be back near the end to help out with the audience questions.
Fantastic. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Fantastic turnout. Looking forward to a great discussion. The topic today, and we're very pleased to have the panelists, I'll introduce them in a second. The topic today is the critical keys for DevOps success, and these are actual organizations that have gone through this process, along with information from Forrester about what they feel is the right things to focus on as you're going through a transformation. So we're excited to have you join us to hear what Forrester and these industry practitioners say. Let me introduce them to you. The first one, Chris Condo. Welcome to the program, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So Chris is over at Forrester, and he is now driving the DevOps, part of the DevOps practice over there. So we're very pleased to have him joining us on this webinar, good friend of the firm and someone we talk to all the time. Aloisio Rocha from NetEnt. Hello.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. What time is it for you over there?
It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
5 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's a worldwide telecast. So we appreciate you making the time for us. Manish Aggarwal from Intel. Good morning.
Hey, Sam. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. It's awesome to have you join us. Thank you so much for being here. Last but not, Gary McKay from Somos. Hello.
Hello, good morning from the great state of Virginia.
Wonderful. All right, so we are bi-coastal, we are multi-continental, and we're talking about the things that people need in order to be successful, right? Deployment success, deployment automation, self-service automation, and modernizing apps with microservices. I'm going to start with Chris Condo to sort of set the table for us. Chris, you talk with lots and lots of organizations. You do lots of research. You have access to lots of fantastic research. In fact, the folks who are on this webinar are going to be getting a free copy of the last year's CDRA Wave, one in which Electric Cloud was clearly up in the leader quadrant. So we're really excited to be sharing that with the audience. Chris, I'm going to hand it off to you to talk a little bit about what Forrester's views are around the critical components for DevOps success. Chris?
Yes, thank you very much, Sam. It's a pleasure. So one of the things that Sam alluded to is that we do have access to a lot of research. We not only work with vendors, we also work with end users and practitioners of these technologies. And you know, we meet and we delve into all the different issues, the concerns, and a lot of times, you know, the picture isn't always rosy. People are still struggling with technology adoption. They're still struggling with organizational dysfunction, or maybe not dysfunction, but just trying to figure out how to further optimize. One of the very key components to any sort of transformational effort, whether it's just trying to, deliver software faster, whether it's trying to meet your customers' needs, it's really putting the customer first. We call this the customer-obsessed operating model, and it really should be what drives your DevOps effort in order to deliver faster with speed. And we have 4 sort of main components that go with that, and that is or 4 principles. Those are being customer-led, and that means like your customers are sort of like the people you're supposed to be serving. Don't make life easier for yourself. Make life easier for your customers. Make them give them a delightful experience, and provide them with the capability and the functionality that they're looking for. This has recently, I would say, like in the last 10 years, really accelerated, where customers are now in the driver's seat. They're able to download apps. They're able to eliminate apps they don't want. They're choosing automobiles based on really the digital experience they're having between their phone and their car, and not just about how fast the car goes, which is so upside down compared to when I was a kid getting my license. It's just absolutely amazing how customers are viewing technology and digital transformational efforts as they reflect upon their day-to-day life. The other thing is being insights-driven. Insights-driven means collecting information from your production, collecting information directly from your customers, as in using chatbots, using analytics across your log files, trying to get voice of the customer any which way you can, and not only grabbing the customer and external data, but how do you grab data from your internal capabilities? Are you actually collecting metrics? Are you actually collecting KPIs that allow you to improve and optimize on the services that you're delivering, and the speed at which you're delivering them, and the quality at which you're delivering them? Fast. Delivering fast is extremely important, and this sort of like pushes aside the whole urge to be perfect. There was a time, when I started as a software developer, where you tried to test the heck out of everything because you wanted it to be perfect, and invariably it would go out the door after our 1-year cycle, and it would be broken. There'd be something wrong with it, and that's because we just didn't practice release cycles that often. We didn't practice releasing software that often. It was an abnormal part of activity. It wasn't a normal part of activity. And so now the new mantra is, hey, listen, just get it out there. And, sure, there are some industries that have safety issues and critical issues, but not all of it needs to be tested to the nth degree, because chances are you're going to miss things. So try to go fast and focus on recovery and mean time to recovery and that sort of thing. The other piece is being connected. And that means not only being connected with your customer, it means being internally connected. Each of the teams that's part of, or each of the personas that's part of delivering software to your customers should be connected, preferably on a product-focused team, but at least loosely connected by some sort of matrix organization. The technology should be connected so that each piece can feed information to the other upstream and downstream. And all of those components come together in what we call the modern application delivery, and it's combined structure, technology, culture, process, metrics, and talent. Next. So the very first step, and I just actually met with a client yesterday, and I said, the best way that you can decide how to optimize your process is to perform what we call a value stream map. Value stream mapping uncovers waste in the pipeline. But before it even uncovers the waste, it actually helps you uncover what your pipeline is. What's going on? What are the steps between business and delivery? How long is it taking? How much process time is there? How much wait time is there? Once you have this understood, and you have these blocks sort of laid out end to end, and they might be different whether you're doing a mobile app, whether you're doing a back-end service, whether you're doing a web service, whether you're doing some other kind of in-between kind of technology, what you'll find is that you are going to uncover all the various steps. Maybe there's a person who has to go and talk to 3 other people before they can get an idea approved, and maybe the development manager didn't realize that. Well, those types of steps need to be included in here so you can decide, where do we need to automate, where do we need to reduce manual approval processes, where can we further improve and optimize our process, and what are the different things that we can do to connect these things together to speed that up. Next. So as I was just saying, once you get through that whole value stream mapping, that whole value stream, understanding what the value stream is, then you can start to think about how to build your tool pipe, your pipeline, which is an integrated tool chain specifically. And the idea, in the metaphor of this circle, is that it's continuous integration, it's continuous delivery, but it never stops. The idea is that you're continuously improving as well. And the other important aspect here is that this product-centric team, where everybody's sort of involved from the beginning to the end, is really key to delivering value and delivering an optimized experience to your customers. And so that means having the ops guy included in the design with the business person, with the QA person, with the developers. I can tell you personally that, from being a consultant and then my years of being, research and development at Microsoft, that having this team up front helps unblock a lot of issues downstream, helps you understand what the product's requirements are going to be before you even start writing the product. And along the way, each of these various tools integrated together just simply accelerates the process. It allows for data capture. It allows for you to actually measure and then refine and improve the process. Next.
Love it.
Thanks. And so here's another thing that people don't normally think about, and this is the idea that modernizing your architecture, going to something that is component-based, such as microservices and containers, can actually help facilitate organizational change and actually help facilitate the acceleration of delivery. The problem with a lot of companies today with a big monolith or even really large, big, giant chunks of capability and functionality is that one person can't wrap their arms around it. 5 people can't wrap their arms around it. 20 people can barely wrap their arms around it because no one really knows how it works. No one really knows what it's supposed to do. And no one really knows how do you test it to completeness, because once you get through the outer veneer of some of these big monoliths, you have no idea how they actually work. So what we have seen time and time again is that companies that eventually adopt this whole notion of moving to containers, for one thing, to provide a level of abstraction between the development team and the operations team, sort of like a separation of concerns. And then once you get beyond that, taking that monolith and trying to break it out into multiple components so that product teams can actually own metrics for their own particular core piece of functionality. It's simpler to understand. It's loosely coupled rather than tightly coupled. And it enables these things to be released at different schedules if the business desires that to happen. There's no reason in this type of an architecture that a critical bug in one of these components has to be held up because all the other components needs to be released. So moving to this type of a loosely coupled architecture, which I'll be quite honest, I had a lot of doubts about a few years ago until I sat in on a meetup with a local firm that's a online retail firm, and they were talking about how this actually empowered their teams to work independently and autonomously from each other. And that's when I it sort of clicked in my head that going to microservices isn't necessarily about having a bunch of small services. It's about having well understood pieces of functionality that teams can own independent of each other and move at their own pace as necessary and as the business dictates. That's the real key critical factor to moving to this type of architecture. It's a real enabler of autonomy and agility. Next.
Amen. All right.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I've heard, though, and from talking to end users, and this actually, it came up in the CDRA wave that Sam alluded to. It also came up in the wave that I conducted, which was the CI wave, continuous integration. And that is a lot of technology and brain power from these development teams has been invested in actually connecting their tool chain together. Whether they're using Jenkins or some other types of continuous integration tools, they might have an Agile planning tool, they have testing tools, they have artifact repository, they have release management tools. Linking all those together, they found, has a real cost to it. And what I've been hearing, this is pretty common is that it's about 10% of these development teams is dedicated just maintaining the tool chain. So my recommendation and what I'm seeing happening in the industry is that DevOps tools that offer pre-integrated components can really help you accelerate and lower the maintenance cost of delivering an automated tool chain. There are several on the market, but it's good to look at ones that kind of provide an end-to-end experience or as much of an end-to-end experience as possible. Use self-service environments to allow developers to test and debug as needed. And what I mean by that is if a developer is trying to work something through a system, they should be able to just click a button and have a tool chain created for them that allows them to build and test in a separate environment that they can then say, okay, I understand how this works. I can play around it in my little sandbox. Now that I have it understood, I can integrate it into the central trunk and we can move on. We know that type of self-service environment, they either create a separate branch because they're afraid of polluting the main branch, or they have to ask somebody for permission to create something. It just ends up slowing the whole thing down. So what you really want is a self-service kind of situation where developers aren't waiting for someone to help them, establish infrastructure to help them get their job done. And the bottom line is just keep it simple, right? Try to pick simple solutions that facilitate and enable you to get things done rather than create an extra burden on your team that you now not only have to maintain the code and now the new automated tests that you wrote, you also need to maintain all these tool chains. You really need to think about a way to kind of simplify that and make your team more productive on the product sense versus just the automation part. And that's basically my 3 steps to success.
Spiel. Well, I love it. All fantastic information. And it just so happens, it's almost like we planned it. It just so happens that all of those things you talked about are going to come up as anecdotal stories in the conversation that we're going to have from the next couple of panelists. So I appreciate that, Chris. That's fantastic information.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's true stuff, Sam, right? I mean, customers are telling us that it's just very difficult to maintain these tool chains. They want to keep things simple. And a lot of times they don't understand why microservices are important. They think it's just a pattern, another architectural pattern that's a way to write code. And I'm like, it's more than that. It's an enabler of agility that you might not have looked at from that concept. So it's very, very interesting.
We did a webinar recently with Jez Humble, Anders, our CTO, Get Loose, deconstructing, decomposing the monolith into microservices, where they go in, it's a whole hour DevOps.com webinar with them talking about that exact topic. And so I would urge listeners to go and check that one out as well. Some fantastic information on how you go about doing that. And we're also going to hear about how one of our customers actually did that in just a minute. So that's fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So let's start, though, from a customer perspective with the first key that you talked about, which is that deployment automation, automating those deployments for folks. And I'm going to invite Aloisio to unmute and tell us a little bit about NetEnt and about his journey towards continuous delivery with DevOps.
All right. So hi, guys. I'm Aloisio Rocha from NetEnt. And like Sam said, I'm going to talk about my view on deployment automation and how we leverage that at NetEnt. We're a provider of gaming solutions and games, like the kind of games you see in online casino websites. We provide both the gaming platform and produce games. We have over 110 million gaming transactions running through our systems on a daily basis. So roughly 16 times the New York Stock Exchange in terms of gaming transactions. We're managing over 3,000 virtual servers in our production environments alone. So to give you a bit of background, a couple of years back, we were seeing real issues in terms of how we were working with deployment of new versions of our applications to our customers. The applications were not being developed with deployment in mind, at least not deployment at scale. The business was growing and expanding to new markets, more opportunities, aggressive onboarding goals. So all these things combined got us really worried we wouldn't be able to keep up, considering each deployment back then took 2 to 4 hours per customer, meaning downtime for our games with that customer. We were working with 30 to 40 step checklists per deploy per customer, all manual, copy pasting. And at one point, when we were forced to deploy a compliance patch over the whole customer base, that took us about 18 months to complete. That's with 10 or more people dedicated to just deploying this patch, keeping in mind that we had other things to do as well to keep the business running. So this patch specifically showed us how much the absence of deployment automation was hurting us. You know, putting stuff on hold, slowing down the pace for other work in order to get this done. So the term deployment pain was very real for us at that time.
Yeah, Aloisio, I just want to call this out again, that it was 18 months of 10 engineers working 4 hours a day to update your entire customer landscape for a critical security patch. 18 months where you couldn't work on any other sort of foundational pieces to help make your processes better because you were just doing that busy work. It seems pretty outrageous, but I bet you there are people in the audience that are sort of nodding their head going, yeah, you know, we've got that same problem. So
I don't think it's unheard of. Yeah, I don't think it's unheard of. And, you know, we had to pull a team together to do this because, like I said, we had other things to do as well. This wasn't the only thing we had to do during our days.
Correct.
The pie chart you're seeing there is a value delivery analysis we did around, I think it was 2 years ago, where we wanted to visualize, you know, time spent, actual time spent. And deploying bug fixes was what we were spending the most of our time on, as well as deploying compliance and market-specific patches. But as you can see, not a whole lot of features going out.
Right. The features and the onboarding and the GA, that's where the money is. And then this stuff is to maintain the money. Yeah.
Right. So say we were rolling out a patch and we've been doing it for some time. So let's say we've covered like 50% of the customer base with that patch. Then someone comes along and goes like, hey guys, we have this new version out, or we got this patch or feature and you need to get this out now. It's priority 1. Well, that 50% you just covered means nothing anymore. You'd have to start over from square one.
Yeah.
So that was kind of our life back then. And this way of working was, you know, it was having impact on business as we saw it. And the potential impact was even higher, considering this was already impeding our capacity to expand to new business and deliver those features. In light of this, we saw that we needed to take action. So we started a project called Time to Market. And the goal was basically to enable us to roll up portfolio, get the products off the shelf, mitigate risk, and enable compliance. You know, being able to deploy patches or features fast to our customers in a repeatable and automated fashion. Considering we were driving the business by deployment, that was where we saw we should focus the efforts. So, you know, take the areas where we spend most of our time on and automating that. Next slide, please.
Yep, and I want to call out this slide from our friends over at Dora and Puppet Labs that stated DevOps report. This is not us saying it, this is not you saying it, this is them saying it, that deployment frequency is the indicator for success. And deployment pain is a big predictor of failure for these DevOps transformations. So focusing on deployment automation is pretty key.
Right. Yeah, so all this basically, it starts with value stream mapping and whiteboarding your processes to really understand what's needed and where to focus your efforts. So for us, besides the mapping and the whiteboarding, it included taking those checklists, breaking them down, but also looking at our applications to see where we could make improvements to allow for the automation. So from that, we basically started to model our deployment and release process, taking the checklists, automating each step, or removing steps if we found it unnecessary or inefficient. Also approving and automating any approval gates. We found that we needed to have one interface for orchestration and streamlining and consistency. Like Gary said, provide a platform or a self-service approach to it. Visibility, traceability, version control was and still is very important. We don't want any black boxes. I think you might recognize from.
And I love your teammates. You've got some that are the green blobs. All these people trying to get involved in doing all this work. I love that you guys have a sense of humor about your business.
Yeah. So if you recognize from the State of DevOps report, they are saying that, like Sam said, automation is a huge boost. And I think they mentioned that they've seen in the research that companies they call high performers are leveraging deployment automation heavily. So we've seen this firsthand by automating deployments and removing the technical impediments. We're freeing up people to do work that adds real business value to the company. Be it, time spent on developing new features or burning down technical debt. Deployment automation in itself adds real business value. So, we've experienced the benefits, and I know our customers are seeing it too, in that deployments are much faster. Going from 2 to 4 hours per deployment to 15 minutes, and adding parallel execution to that, it means 15 minutes for everyone at the same time. And now we're actually doing deploys without any downtime at all, thanks to this initiative. So we're able to deploy to the whole customer base in a fraction of what it used to take us in time. So I'd say, we're actually putting our time on real value for the organization and company instead of copy pasting from checklists all day for 18 months.
Yeah, which frees you up to do more other value-added work for the business.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all of, market entries, onboarding, deploying new features, all of that goes into the business value and what we've seen from the deployment automation. So today I'd say, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Today I'm saying we're much closer to, a state where we can ship code as the business demands, which is what it's all about.
Awesome. And so the 4,000% faster deployments from those 10 people working 4 hours a day, copy pasting for 18 months, you now can do that. It sounds like you can do it even faster than what we have in here, but to 2 people in less than 2 weeks to get your entire environment rolled is a pretty amazing improvement. And with the predictability and all the other benefits that you mentioned, a lot less breakages, a lot less downtime for your customers.
Right. The important part is that it's not only us internally that are seeing the benefits. The customers are seeing it as well. That's really important.
Yeah. And then we have 2 more minutes left. What are you focusing on next, Aloisio? What's next for NetEnt?
Right. Well, we're moving the deployment automation and pipelines. We're shifting those left into the development environments since we started in production. So we're shifting that left, and hopefully we're going to see improvements in everything from quality, speed to agility there as well.
Fantastic. And that's a lovely lead-in to our next speaker. Manish, welcome to
Hi,
the
everyone.
program. Hi. Aloisio, thank you so much. Amazing, phenomenal story of deployment automation and how it can really transform business.
Thanks.
And now we're going to turn the topic, we're going to shift it left a little bit, and we're going to talk about, Manish is going to talk about how he uses self-service test automation and pipelines in QA to really start a DevOps initiative at, I would say, a pretty large organization. Manish, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone. I'm Manish Aggarwal, and I'm glad to be here to share my DevOps journey with all of you. So we were a small team working at LSI, and then we were acquired by Avago, and eventually we were acquired by Intel. So now I represent Intel, but when we started this journey, we were a part of a different company. So let me share as to where we were, what were our problems, and then what goals we set for ourselves, and where we are after a few years of continuous effort and focus in towards our DevOps journey. Next slide, please. Yes. So this slide is a very heavy slide, and I would like your attention here. This is not something that only we had. I think a lot of organizations are in the same state or were in the same state at some point in time, and I'll help you understand this slide. So where were we when we embarked our journey for DevOps? So we were doing just about 4 releases a year, quarterly release, something that is very common, or at least it used to be common. But anybody who has embarked the DevOps journey, this seems like the time when dinosaurs were here. So at that time, we were making far less releases, and the QA lead time per cycle was in days. That you drop the code to the QA team, and if we ask them as to when can we release, the estimate was always in terms of multiple days and at least a few weeks. And what was the scale? We were dealing with about 3 million lines of code. And the worst part was that a large part of code was being shipped out with unknown quality, with unknown code coverage. We didn't know what we were shipping out. I think Chris mentioned earlier that ship fast. And the underlying assumption there is that you fail fast, but that does not mean that you deliver something to your customers without knowing uh, what's being shipped out. But unfortunately, that was the state uh, we were in at some point in time. And as if that was not enough, we had about 96 combinations that we had to validate. And I'll just come to there in a minute as to how we had these large number of combinations. And we were running just about 100 of test cases per day. And we had a team of good 15 engineers working on that. Now, why we had these multi-dimensional combinations is because we were verifying our software on 5 different platforms, and these are the combinations of the software platforms and their variants. Like you have different Linux flavors and different RTOS on which the software has to be verified. And then we had 16 different features, and each of these features was more important than the other. So it had to be always verified. And then legacy. Legacy in the sense that you're working on your current product, but at the same time, this software is expected to work seamlessly in all the previous generations, and all the new features that you are delivering is expected to not break anything legacy. And what does that mean? That means that you have hundreds and hundreds of test cases to verify, hundreds of combinations to validate for every release, right? And this, as you can see, is not an easy task, and you cannot ask for more people because that's a business reality. that the money is limited, the headcount is limited, so you cannot keep asking for people. So the only solution is that you deliver with the same number of people, and you deliver with the known quality, right? So that's where we were at some point in time, and now from this in the subsequent slides, I'll share as to how we started progressing from this baseline. So we set ourselves some goals, and that goal was that we have these limited resources, but what can we do to make the best use of these resources? And what we saw was that these resources were spending most of their time in executing whatever is already existing. And as someone has said, that machines are better at doing the repetitive tasks, and it's not the engineers. So engineers should spend their time in designing more test cases, in doing more value add to the quality of your product. So we decided that we will always ship out something with known quality instead of shipping something that we don't know. So instead of pushing and then praying that it does not fail in the customer side, we decided to take and handle ourselves and make sure that whatever we are delivering is of good quality. And the only way to achieve that was with test automation. So test automation for me is the most important cog of this whole DevOps wheel. And only when your tests are automated, only when you have the capability to run your tests sooner, provide the feedback to the developers, to the designers as soon as possible in the cycle, that's where the organizational efficiency just shoots up. And that's what we strive for. And at the same time, we cannot forget that we have to use the metrics to drive these decisions. So all the metrics, which includes the test count, how many codes of line you are verifying, how many tests you have, how many tests are failing, all that has to be visible in a bird's eye view fashion to your management. So the tools, the methodology that you decide has to meet all of these criteria. And then remember, you cannot add headcount. So that were the goals, that was the objective with which we started working towards this DevOps journey of ours. Next slide, please. Yes. So what did we do? So we devised our automation solution using one of the electric cloud products, Electric Flow. And these were the few key principles on which the solution was designed. Make it on demand. What does it mean? It means that anybody from QA, from development, from support, whoever wants to run your test, they should be able to run it. There should not be any dependency on the particular engineer, because all of us have been in this situation where it works on my system. Why it's failing for you, I have no idea. But unfortunately, that is not something that you can tell your customers that it's working for me. Now you go figure out what's going on at your end, right? So we needed an independent way of verification, which is a tool which is running the test, which is running the same device under test, and only when it passes in that neutral environment is when a scenario, a test, a feature is deemed complete. So we made it on demand, anybody, everybody. And the whole environment that needed to be provisioned, the whole configuration that was required for the test execution was all part of this environment itself. So there was nothing which was user dependent. Along with the code which was being tested, your tests were also versioned. So as comes out the new delivery, at the same time you branch your QA test repo, and they go hand in hand. So that cannot be an afterthought. Your tests cannot be designed after that. The QA team has to be plugged in right from day one along with the dev team. So what else? We create reusable test scripts. Now, as you can see that we had a large number of test cases to deal with, and it's not possible that we write separate test automation for all of these tests. So the idea was, and one of the design principles that we used was that all the test scripts that you are creating needs to be handled more than one test suite, more than one feature, more than one block. And that way we were able to achieve efficiency during test automation as well. And then assure easy access. As you can imagine, if you have tens of thousands of tests, any UI would fail because you will spend a lot of time just to dig out what kind of tests are relevant to this feature. If there is any new feature being added, you have to do the impact analysis as to what are the other things that I need to validate. And if that in itself becomes a chore, then that test will not be run. So it was imperative that you organize your test in such a way that based on the parameters, based on a few key fields, you should be able to shortlist the tests which are applicable and need to be verified. And then share the visibility. It's not that only the QA team or only the development team or only the support team will take a call or say the quality of the product. Everybody should be able to see that at the same time. And that's where the dashboard feature was very useful, where all the results of all the features of all the branches can be depicted in a bird's eye view, and anybody can go there and see which tests are running, which tests are failing, when did they last pass, and why they are failing, because the complete logs are available from that single interface. And for anybody who wants to debug that further, they can drill down and access the the versioning system, they can access the test logs, they can access the test, they can access the software and everything. So all the information is available for them to provide a fix of the issue that they have just seen. Moving on. Yes. So what did that help us achieve? It transformed my team from test executors to test engineers. And all of us were thinking that we have test engineers, but actually we had a bunch of engineers which were only doing test execution. And needless to say that that was not a huge motivation for the team. So now
Yeah.
that those executors have been really made into engineering, they are adding more value, they are more motivated, and obviously they are doing a better job than they were doing before. So I would like to add that we added a custom UI which was over and above the base product that we were using. And that was because every customer's needs is different. So your needs will be different than mine, your environment is different than mine. So if the base product does not meet your needs, then it's absolutely worthwhile to invest some effort in getting a solution which is tailor made to your needs with 80% of the common features and 20% of the things which are just applicable to your environment. We also wanted that all the results be automatically emailed to all the stakeholders. Now you decide your stakeholders, whether it's the development team, it's the whole QA team, it is a set of engineers, whoever, it's up to you. And then only if your gating tests are passing, a check-in should be accepted. It should not be an afterthought that, okay, now everybody has checked in, I will start testing now. That's never going to work. So the testing has to happen hand in hand. So by engaging the QA team far earlier in the cycle, what you can achieve is that the tests are ready when the feature is ready from the development team. And the feature will be allowed access into your master repo, into your mainline, or whatever versioning system you use and the terms for that. The tests have to pass for that feature to be accepted. So nobody is allowed to break your pipeline at any cost. And that allows you to make a lot more informed decision, a lot more uh, quality conscious decision, and you can make your customers happy because you're always delivering them something which with your quality stamp on that. Moving on. So this is just one slide as to how our dashboard looks like. And as you can see, we have three colors here. We have this green, red, and yellow. And internally, we as engineers also call it go green along with the environmentalists, because the message is, if it is green in your dashboard, then the life is green. That is the best green that you can produce as engineers. No test failing, right? And as you can see, this is a very concise view. Anybody can go there and see. The delivery manager can go and check whether they are release ready. They don't have to ask or rely on spreadsheets or any of those outdated tools and methodologies. And then this is the shared language that everybody understands. Everybody understands the test count. Everybody understands how many tests passing, how many tests failing. There is no subjectivity to it. Everything is so objective. Approval gates, change requests, everything is fully auditable. There is a complete track record, complete history of what has been delivered, what has been tested, the logs are saved. So even if you have to go back in time, you don't have to dig through individuals' home directories or workspace. Everything is available right in this one place. Going on. Yes, so where are we today? We are making a lot more releases. We are making, instead of quarterly releases, it's like 100 releases, which means every fortnight we have the software shipping out of our doors. From 85% unknown code coverage, we are at 87% known code coverage, which is a lot more comfortable state to be in. And we are running far more test cases today than we ever were. And the QA lead time, which was in days, now it is shrunk to minutes. And that's because we are not doing that in a big hammer approach. Instead of that, it's a continuous process. Continuously, you are able to verify your software. Your machines are doing the job 24/7. Your teams across the globe have the same access. There is less reliance on individuals and more reliance on automation. Going on. So what next? So now that we have achieved this, we want to make this even better. We want to add more and more tests, because now there is no restriction. We don't need more people. The quality is already there. The framework is already there, and you can add more features at any point in time. So if we could do it, I am very enthusiastic to say, very positive to say that even you can do it. Thank you.
That's amazing. Manish, thank you so much for sharing that story of transformation, moving your teams from being test executor people to being more test engineers, and the benefits that got from you. There was a cultural change there, but it allowed your entire business to accelerate, which is a fantastic lead in. It's almost like I planned it, to the next conversation that we're going to have with Gary McKay from Somos. Hey, Gary.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. We're running just a little bit late here. I don't want you to get short shrift, so I'm going to make it short. Gary's going to talk about how they used microservices at Somos to help accomplish a lot of that transformative stance that the other two have talked about. So, Gary, let me hand it off to you.
Thank you. So this is my Somos family here. We are probably the least known company, but you interface with us probably every day. We are the neutral stewards of all the toll-free numbers in North America. That's Canada and the US. So next slide, please. So what we had to do, what we were looking at for the last 30 years, we've been on Big Iron. We've been on the mainframe. And so one of the things that we decided to help our customers move to the 21st century is that we have to feature-proof ourselves. And so what we have to do is figure out, okay, so how do we move off of the mainframe, which has served us so well in the last 30 years, to a more modern environment to better help our customers? How do we do that? And once we made that decision, we embarked on, and we're still on that journey, we embarked on a journey to move from the mainframe-centric applications, which has really served us well and served our customers well, to a more modern day platform, microservices, distributed architecture world, to make life easier for not only for our customers, but it also enabled us to, to add more modern features as our customer demand increases and as their market share and how they want to do things in a toll-free world expanded to keep up with our modern fast-paced society. Right, we went from people having a phone in their house. I remember I was growing up, we had a phone in our house, to where now we don't have a phone. We all use cell phones and Skype and whatever, and we don't really have that house phone that most of us probably grew up with.
The only thing the house phone is good for is getting phone calls from telemarketers.
Exactly, or a good paperweight. Yep. Next slide, please.
All right, and I do want to mention that this guy in the picture he's one of the impending retirees. Chris Condo mentioned this earlier, is that these monoliths, they're sort of a hairball of stuff in there, and if you don't have people that can understand it, and if they're retiring, a lot of these guys are retiring, that can complicate things for teams.
Exactly. Not only that, the cost. We all want to be good stewards of our resources, and just the cost of maintaining that, as well as adding features. And when you do, and I'll talk about this later, but as you do deployments, things are measured. I think, like one of my colleagues said, things are measured in days. In our case, it's measured in hours, long hours, 12, 14, 15-hour deployments, because that's the nature of the beast. So okay, let's move on. So one of the things that we needed to do was to be able to take the functionality and what the mainframe does for us, right? We don't want to lose that functionality. There's a lot of business rules. There's a lot of things that the mainframe does really well, but we want to encapsulate that. So we wanted to take that functionality and make it a more microservices functionality, even starting off with more of the coarse grain API levels, and then as we move from the coarse grain more to the fine grain in a microservices architecture, that's that transition we want to do. Because one of the prime objectives for us is to do no harm, to reduce the amount of disruption to our customer base. The other thing is, how do we create, one of the other goals is, how do we create the bridge from, say, a mainframe-centric world to a more modern DevOps culture? And then to create this, to automate it all, so we can take the manual labor out of it and then push it down to our development teams and testing teams, and get away from this sort of center of excellence where you have these monolithic organizations that does all the operational stuff. We have a great operational team that maintain the mainframe along with our vendor partners. But how do you merge that world to make it more dev-centric, but not lose the operational capability that our great folks in the operations shop have developed over the last set of years? And then finally, how do you unclog the pipeline to accelerate releases? How do you go from a 14-hour release tempo to a 2-hour, to a 20-minute deployment? And how do you do those things frequently? Those are the goals that we set for ourselves. Next slide, please. So what did we do? Well, we had a lot of lunch and learns. We had a lot of discussion. One of the things that works well for our culture, especially in Somos, is that we're more family oriented. So we spent a lot of time talking and finding a commonality between how does the operation group does things and how do we and the development shop does things. And then of course we had to bring our vendor partners in. So we had a lot of lunch and learns. We sat down with my colleague, my counterpart in the operations world, and we sat down and we had to find the commonalities between what we do, and we had to find ways to work together efficiently, as though we needed to take advantage of the people power and the brain power, the brain trust that we had in the organization, and to effectively mold this into a very cohesive world where we can get this done. So along with some value streaming that I personally did, over the weekend to figure out, okay, where's the value at? Where are we missing it? Where's like an old BPR days, where are we spending the most time in the queue, and how do we do that? And so we have to decompose. We have to figure out how not only to do that, but we have to figure out how to decompose the legacy mainframe into microservices. And so we have a lot of architects, and we have a great architect group that had to figure that out. And then we have to re-engineer and merge our processes. Now, at the same time as we're doing these things, right, we also are flying the plane, right? It's not like we can land the plane for a certain amount of time and just work on it. It's like the old EDS commercial. You're building the plane while you're flying it at the same time. And we actually had to do that. We have to maintain our current customer base, make sure there's no disruption. But at the same time, we have to build this core capability and this project to move as well as maintain our legacy, as well as maintain and build this modernized environment. And then we have to think about how do we provide oversight of our DevOps process along with not only our cloud vendors like AWS, but we also have a hybrid environment. We have AWS for the development environment, but we also have our two data centers that actually is our production environment, and also to manage, provide effective oversight, right, where you're not burdening your vendors, but you have to also make sure that you bring them into the fold. And of course, we also started collecting and sharing. That's important. It's important. Not only do you need to collect metrics, but you also need to share it, right? You also need to say that sometimes the baby is ugly. Sometimes, you know what, we did take 14 hours to do that. We did run into problems in this, and we really need to fix that. Why did it take 20 minutes for this server to reboot, and things of that nature? We really have to be very honest with ourselves to make sure that we can fix the problems as we encountered them. Next slide, please. Oh, and not to mention the training aspect. We not only did we want to do the training, but we have to make training fun. And as part of that culture, there's nothing like having training with pizza. That is a prime motivator. That's one of those easy things. If you want to get people involved and you want to get a lot of these folks with big brains involved and stuff, and get not only their hearts and hands involved in it, serve pizza, right? That's an easy thing.
Is that the fourth critical key to DevOps success? Is to bring pizza?
That's like 3.5 of the 3 keys is to serve pizza. So what are the outcomes? So how did this work? And I'm taking 9 months of stuff and trying to put it into a 15-minute slide. So we went from literally a day's worth, almost a day and a half of doing a deployment. Our first deployment took a day, almost 2 days, to an hour deployments. Now our average is about an hour. If we go over an hour, we're really concerned. That's a good thing, right? Because when you start looking at it like, oh, geez, we're over an hour, guys. What's the problem? Is it something we need to look at? We get a little nervous when a deployment takes more than an hour. And so we went to when we do deployments and say our lower environments versus releases, that takes 20 minutes. If it goes past 20 minutes in our cloud environment, an AWS environment, we start to get a little concerned. But that's a good problem to have, right? That's a good problem to have. You don't have people on the phone for 12 hours to do a deployment. You don't have people on the phone for 2 days to do a release. And then one of the other things, one of the other great outcomes of this is that we're less reliant on third-party vendors. Not to say we don't love our vendor partners, but one of the things that we have to do as a smart company is that we have to leverage what we have. We have to do more with less, because we have a lot of great people. We do depend a lot on our vendors, but we wanted to reduce some of that core, the core capabilities we needed to keep in shop. One of the other things, and I think my colleague, we talked about this a lot, even when we were at DUS, that we needed to pipeline. We need to make make our DevOps environments more pipeline driven. And this is the notion where a developer comes in and says, hey, I want to deploy to a QA environment. Instead of, getting the whole tech ops team or DevOps, creating this huge DevOps team that comes in and does all that for you, it'd be great to put everything in the pipeline and then have a developer do it and have the testing team do it. And it becomes a service versus, as it becomes a service more than an event. All right, so we want to make less events and more service oriented. We were able to do that. We're able to add more customer value because we're able to add features that our customers want versus telling them, hey, it's going to take us, a half a year to do that. We're now with the API and microservice-centric focus, we're able to better serve our customers, by doing things smart. For instance, if our customers want to do more toll-free number texting, how do you do that? You can't. It's hard to do that in a mainframe world. Right, but in the modernized world, we're able to do that now because we've moved to a more modernized platform. So it's an enabler. This whole thing is an enabler for us. And here's kind of a high-level workflow of what our process is like. And as you can see, we use a number of tools in our environment, but the thing that orchestrates it all for us is electric flow, and that's been an immense help for us. Because we not only can orchestrate things, but we can also take that and put it in pipelines. And now our developers and now our testers, now we can push that down to them. Now we still have the responsibility of doing releases into the production environment. That's still a holdover from our mainframe production control environment. But you know what? We do it smarter. Right, we do it smarter. Right, it doesn't take us 36 hours. It doesn't take us 12 hours to do that. We can do that in a couple of hours. Next slide. So what's next for us? Well, we're starting moving to more of the next phase for us. We want to do more pipelines as a service. We want to focus more on making our microservices environment more fine-grained. Then what the other thing we want to do is be able to in the environment to deploy in multiple environments, all without any downtime. So we wanted to make sure that we can do some rolling deployments. We want to make sure, because we still kind of do our deployments during our sync points or during the maintenance windows that we have to make sure that our customers are not disrupted. So now we want to do these deployments without any disruption, without any and without doing it within 12, 11:30 at night. We want to do it in the middle of the day during our work hours. So that's what we're focusing on. That's what's next for us.
That's fantastic. We are you guys rocked it. Amazing information, amazing stories of continuous improvement. I fully expect you guys to have accelerated your improvement trend next time we talk. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Aloisio, Manish, Gary, thank you guys for sharing your stories with us. I know there's a bunch of folks out there that asked questions. We are unfortunately out of time because we had too much other awesome information to share. We will those questions and send them out to the folks. Don't forget, this is going to be posted for replay. And again, thank you to DevOps.com, to Chris, Aloisio, Manish, Gary, and the rest of the team for making this happen.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a real pleasure.
Bye-bye.